Buonasera a tutti. Innanzitutto vorrei ringraziarvi di essere qui al Castello di Rivoli, tarda sera, con il lavoro domani o lo studio domani, quindi non è weekend, quindi grazie a tutti voi che siete incuriositi e interessati all'opera di Claire Pentecost. Vorrei anche ringraziare, colgo l'occasione per ringraziare il curatore Marianna Veceglio che ha seguito per il nostro museo questo progetto, che è una collaborazione con a.titolo, che è un collettivo che opera basato a Torino e che opera da molti anni. Dovremmo eliminare le bottiglie di plastica dalle conferenze. There's more plastic. More plastic.
Always more plastic.
More plastic, more plastic.
It's infinite.
Infinite plastic. E quindi ringrazio coloro del gruppo di a.titolo che sono qui, ringrazio il nostro Dipartimento Educazione e tutti i ragazzi che ho visto nel workshop molto breve realizzare la prima performance di Claire Pentecost. Voi potete pensare che Claire Pentecost fa sempre performances, ma no, è la sua prima e quindi è importante notarlo dal punto di vista della germinazione delle sue attività. So there's a problem of language. We have no translator here.
And I would like to apologize that I don't speak Italian, although my students have been teaching me a lot of Italian. It may not serve us tonight.
Here's something. So, let's
Wait a
just
minute.
start.
I just want to say I studied Spanish because in my hemisphere it's the dominant language after English. So you understand.
So, hablamos. ¿No se puede hacer en
Un
español?
poco oxidada.
Un poco oxidada. Ok, allora, a proposito dell'oxidazione e della oxygen, io credo che una delle cose di fondo, voi volete sapere qualcosa di Claire e della sua vita e del suo diventare artista e del suo sviluppo artistico. You want to know a little bit what makes Claire tick and her story and her art, but you also want to know what compost is, because I'm not sure everybody really understands what that biological process is and how fascinating it is. So I think I would like to start by mettere I puntini sugli i and be a little bit precise. Cioè, quando ci sono materiali inerti, io descrivo sempre il compostaggio come l'opposto dell'archivio. I always describe compost as the opposite of the archive. L'archivio tiene anche per il provenance principle tutti i materiali dentro un folder. You keep all the stuff in one folder, you use the provenance principle, you archive, you keep things separate. It is inert until someone makes connections between different parts of archives. In that case, it becomes a compost. Now, the difference between those two ways of accumulating information and knowledge is not only the fact that there are folders that keep things separate in the archive, while they're not separate in the compost, but also it's a magical question that is related to the way desire works. And desire works that if you have too much nitrogen, nothing is alive. If you have too much carbon, nothing is alive. If you have no air, if you have no space between the particles, nothing is alive. But if you have just the right balance between carbon-based, nitrogen-based, and air, between your leftover steak and your leftover vegetables
And your straw.
and your straw
Paper.
and newspaper
And wood chips.
and wood chips, then, and you have the air, the wind, which is so important in desire, the space in between, then you have the possibility of compost, which means that those inert things become something else, which we find akin to compost. Io credo, gentile tecnico, che lei deve fare questo domani e che noi resteremo con uno speaker. Questa è l'ultima autorizzazione che do. Stefano il tecnico. He's bringing in the oxygen, hopefully.
Hello, oxygen.
Okay, oxygen. Okay, so Claire, can you please describe the term compost and how it works in a real, let's say, literal way, and then how you use it metaphorically? Spiegarci il compostaggio dal punto di vista letterale e poi dal punto di vista della metafora che serve a lei come artista.
Thank you, Carolyn, and thank you so many people who've helped us. I can't even name them. I think of compost as alchemy.
Alchimia.
You interrupt the waste stream and you make something very rich and strange. It's also where death becomes the food of life.
È il luogo dove la morte diventa il cibo per la vita.
Because your leftover vegetables and straw and organic material that you would consider waste and throw it away, you put it together and it has to be oxygenated decomposition, which all that means is it's going to decompose, but you want to make sure it has oxygen and adequate moisture. If it has too much moisture, it goes anaerobic, and then you have pathogens. Or if it's wet, if it's too, if it doesn't have enough oxygen, it becomes anaerobic. But otherwise, what you're doing is growing beneficial microorganisms that will make the soil healthy, and they nurture the plants that you want to grow, and they also protect them from diseases and pests, which is really remarkable. But it's the way to have agriculture without artificial chemicals and artificial fertilizer, which is a major source of the toxins in our environment, is our agriculture, which is so perverse because this is our food. What kind of culture thinks it can pour toxins into the same environment where it's growing food for humans? Only a culture that separates the humans from the natural.
But the balance of the planet was better when there was no agriculture, before agriculture.
It's too big a topic.
Okay.
I mean, people argue about when did the Anthropocene start.
Antropocene, quando è cominciato?
Okay, so, the great union of stratigraphers, the geologists who determine geological ages, has decided we've entered a new geological age because we have had such an impact on our planet that it warrants. We're not just a biological agent, we are geological agents.
That's crazy. I spoke to a biologist who said that the Anthropocene is a very good marketing tool to raise our awareness of climate change, but the idea that the humans determine the geological era of the planet is an extraordinarily anthropocentric concept. And if the human species were extinct on the planet, it would take very short amount of time for the climate change to be over and the whole regime of life and worldliness to resume without humans.
Well, the Earth will go on.
Well, therefore, it's not a geological era. It's a question of the survival of the humans on the planet. If we can survive on the planet, messing up the planet or not.
Do you want to have an argument?
Yeah, I thought we could have an argument. Claire, can you tell me, now that we understand, tutti capiscono esattamente adesso che cos'è il compostaggio, giusto? Benissimo. Passiamo all'opera d'arte di un artista. Leonardo wanted to find a way so that in the painting, the thing would be practically like the live organism. The smile just before it erupts, the smile just after it's erupted. That through scientific knowledge, the knowledge of optics, the knowledge of pigment, the knowledge of perception, the knowledge of movement, the physics of movement, he would be able to make life. That reminds me of you.
Who?
Leonardo.
Reminds me of me?
Yes.
Me and Leonardo.
You are also very fascinated with science. You love Lynn Margulis, the idea of symbiotic coevolution as opposed to Darwinian evolution. You look at the smallest things that make life and the way that the inert and the vital are in constant contiguity and continuity. And you make art like composting.
Except that I don't actually make life. That's for the bio artists.
Neither did Leonardo.
Right. And that's a whole other subject. But yeah, I guess you're right. Like compost, you bring together different elements and you start like a chain reaction, right? And you generate new life, more life. And one of my kind of thoughts that I go by is that generosity is generative.
That's interesting. Yes.
Okay.
Etymologically connected.
Yeah, they are, you know, and so in all the things I do, in the workshop, generosity was a leading kind of principle, and I definitely try to use that in my teaching, which I do at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I also teach in the prisons, one prison outside of Chicago, and I think that when we think generously, it's like a kind of morphogenesis, right? We create new forms. And this is one of the ideas of Lynn Margulis, who was
Yes, let's tell everyone who Lynn Margulis was.
An evolutionary biologist, a cell biologist.
She would have had the Nobel Prize had she not died of cancer.
Well, she died at a very old age. In fact, she died in 2011.
So she should have had the Nobel Prize.
But she was still riding a bicycle at whatever, 88. And she theorized, she studied a lot of Russian evolutionary biologists, and she put together the ideas that evolution happens by symbiosis. It's when organisms live closely that they start to change each other. In fact, her idea about the difference between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells, and I'll just remind you that eukaryotic cells have nuclei and prokaryotic cells don't. So where did the nucleus come from? In Lynn's theory, in Ms. Dr. Margulis's theory, one bacteria ate another but did not digest it. So the food bacteria continue to live inside the predatory bacteria. And so after a while, you had an organism that contained something that once was another organism, but is now part and parcel of the new organism. And our cells are full of organelles, which are smaller functional units that metabolize energy, and they have their own DNA. And the theory is that it was this radical intimacy that created
the
new forms,
of chimeric life.
Chimeric life, if you will. In that case, maybe we are.
Lynn Margulis used the word chimeric life.
I like it.
Okay, you use monster.
Monster is
Why?
another.
Do you like the art of the Middle Ages with many monsters?
Well, I think we have monsters too.
In the art of today?
In the science of today.
So what is the monster?
For instance, transgenic organisms, transgenic agriculture, we eat it all the time.
But monster, that has a negative connotation. But the monsters that are not negative, Lynn Margulis' chimera, you love monsters. You made a beautiful piece in the Garfield Park Conservatory, where all the plants from all the world are collected.
Sorry, I have to stretch.
Is that the Garfield Conservatory? Look.
Garfield Park Conservatory?
No,
that's something else. There are no pictures of it up here.
Anyway, you made monsters and they were beautiful and lively and they were lovely.
The monster is the thing that combines many elements in a strange way, and so we don't recognize it. The monster is what we cannot recognize, and it doesn't fit into categories. So the hybrid, the chimera, is a hybrid, and people first thought these were monsters. Depends on how much you know, right? So in the piece that she's referring to in the Garfield Park Conservatory, everything in the conservatory, all these plants are labeled. They all have a place in the Linnaean system, right? And so I started thinking about what doesn't fit into a category. What are the things we don't even know about and we have not yet categorized? I was also thinking about the spirit of place, the genius loci, which the Romans believed in, among
the
other
genius
people.
loci, come spiritello.
Yeah, and in the conservatory you have, like, all the palms are in one room, all the desert plants are in one room, all the ferns are in one room, and you have
L'orto botanico.
You have a plant from Australia living next to a plant from North Africa. And I'm thinking, what about the places where they came from? And what happens to the spirit of a place when that place is disturbed beyond recognition? And then I was thinking, maybe those spirits become refugees. So I made a canoe full of hybrid creatures. Maybe you would call them queer, because they didn't fit into any binary or categorization. And they were floating above the palms in the palm house, which is about, I don't know how many meters high, very high, yeah, like maybe 20 meters high. And then I started thinking, maybe these are climate refugees. Because like many of my pieces, it started with a vision. I saw the picture of this.
In un sogno?
And
in a dream?
No, a waking vision. I don't know how it happens, but it happens. And I think it's the unconscious. And then when I'm making it, I start to figure out what it means. Does that make sense?
Yes. Why not?
Why not?
What about, is this metaphoric? Are the sculptures or the drawings or the paintings? You draw very well, disegna molto bene, Claire, ama dipingere, ama fare sculture, quindi volevo capire se c'era un aspetto metaforico, se tutto questo riguarda solo il contenuto o qualcosa di più delle sue opere. Is it content of your art, or is it a metaphor, or is there something literal in the art that is symbiotic, for example?
I do a lot of research. And the problem for the research-driven artist is form. Because once you've done all this research, you have to arrive at a form that can be something we call art, which I think is different than if I wrote a paper or posted all the text of my research on the wall. So I'm really interested in form. This is the creative challenge for me. So it's not really, and so in many fields, the form is a given, right? If you're a scientist, there's a form for your research paper. In art, you might inherit a form, like a painting, like an easel painting, or you might put together a form. I would say invent, but sometimes you borrow it from another field that's going to add to the meaning. So you invent a form or borrow a form that contributes to what you're trying to say, so that there's an integration of form and whatever else you're pouring into this labor.
But you know, Rosenkrantz, it's not a form and content division. There's the content of the form and there's the form of the content too.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. Well, not exactly. You said the integration between form and content.
I'm not Rosalind Krauss.
Okay, so form is important. Now that reminds me of early 20th century artists particularly interested in biological forms, looking for an essential form in the microscope and turning into miro or other abstract, more or less surrealist works. So you feel akin to that search for form through, for example, looking at the forms of life that are not immediately visible, like in a microscope. You're part of that history, that legacy?
I haven't thought about it before, but yeah, I'm happy to be.
You and Miro, you can hang out.
Yeah, I like Miro.
Who else do you like? Quali sono I preferiti artisti?
Oh, I hate that question.
I know, but I have to ask something simple.
But that's not simple. I mean, I'm
just go like
okay.
Like 10 names.
I feel kind of mercurial, right? I mean, I love Goya. I love Goya's prints, his etchings.
You know, we have all of them, by the way. Thanks to Cerutti, we have the complete Disasters of War, Capriccio, and Tauromachia. Everything.
I love Goya's attitude. You know, he just witnessed, and he didn't shrink from the reality of what was happening around him. But he had a kind of philosophical approach to it, like the folly of being human. And there's something that's essentially sympathetic in a way. And they're beautiful.
Okay, and if you were the Goya of someone 100 years from now or on another planet, what would they say about your work, an artist?
It's not my job.
Okay, I'll imagine.
See, it's not so
Well, on the one hand, they would say that you're one of the artists who broke the division between activism and art. You're the so-called activist artist who does projects that are often wanting to actually modify things in terms of climate or seeds or so forth, and you feel that artistic practice is also practice within those realms. They would say that maybe, partly? Okay, that's the boring one. Then they would say,
You know, I really rely on my unconscious a lot. I mean, I do a lot of research, I do a lot of
but you like to
cogitating.
draw, and drawing is looking, drawing is seeing.
Yeah, I think that one of the things about art is that it can engage a full human sensorium and not just the cognitive, right? I mean, I'm not going to undersell the cognitive. It's very important, but we are so much more, and we can be really deceived by a strictly cognitive approach. Because we're responding all the time in so many ways because we're so complex.
So tell us your story.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you a secret.
Oh, okay, that's good. Finalmente. Tell us a secret.
This is shocking.
Okay.
Okay, so meanwhile, I'm totally blinded by these lights. So I'm just going to close my eyes. I was invited by the Castello di Rivoli to do a project about compost. And I was doing a lot of things, and I didn't have time to think about it. And I had a Skype appointment with the curators, Mariana and Francesca, and it was at 8 in the morning, and about 10 minutes before the appointment, I started writing some notes, because I had no ideas. And I got on the phone, and this thing came out of my mouth. I said, I want to work with young people, and I want to have a workshop where we study compost and we try to understand it through the body. And then we make a performance. And I had never had that thought before until I got on the phone and had to have a thought. And then I said, and then we're going to have some experts come in, and maybe a philosopher, and maybe a scientist, and they will add things, and then we'll complicate the performance a little bit more, and then blah, 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 blah. And they were like, that's great. That's amazing. And I was like, yeah, it is. But afterwards, I thought, where did that come from? And I remembered certain thoughts I had had in the month before about a desire to do movement with other people, to choreograph, to dance, and to approach this topic in a way I had never approached it before, because I've worked with compost for quite a while, and I've worked on matters that are concerned by agriculture and also climate change. But I think that the unconscious, obviously, I believe in the unconscious, and it's active all the time. And one of the things we are allowed to do as artists is to tap our unconscious. I tell my students, you're going to have a life that's not scripted if you don't want it to be. Because there's not...
Yeah, but tell us your story. Like, when did you decide you were an artist? You were born where? How did it happen? Did you go to art school? Who was important to you?
Quickly. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, which is the southeast of the United States.
Agriculture area.
Peanuts.
Peanuts, in fact.
Peanuts and cotton and tobacco. And my grandparents had a farm outside of the city.
A farm?
A farm.
We're getting somewhere.
And for me, the farm was a place of unstructured time. It was a place where I could play and imagine. And it gave me a kind of kooky idea of nature, that nature is a place where we go to imagine. Now, ironically, I didn't think of nature as farming. That didn't happen. I was living in New York, being an artist, and when I got to be around 40 years old, I decided I needed to solve the problem of the job. So I got a teaching job in Chicago. I moved to the Midwest, where there's like corn and soy, factory farms. And Creative Time invited me to make a proposal about biotechnology. So I started researching that, and I found in 1998, the only place where it was really already happening was agriculture. And people in the United States were eating transgenic crops, and there was no discussion of it. So I started researching food and...
Monsanto and so forth. That's when you were interested in Monsanto and patenting.
Yeah, Monsanto, for instance. And I found that the food system is opaque, it's global, it's secretive, and the power is concentrated in a few corporations, a handful of corporations. And I just couldn't stop researching. And I was fascinated. And it dawned on me in 1998 that food is nature. Which, you can only not realize that if you come from a culture that thinks nature is wilderness. But nature is not only wilderness, obviously. It's us, it's all around us. We engage it all the time, and maybe one of the most intimate ways is food. And food is ruled by all kinds of cultural norms. Except in our culture, it's kind of haywire, right? Because every other week you read another article that says, don't eat this, do eat this, don't eat that, don't eat butter, do eat butter, don't eat prunes, eat oat bran, eat whatever. And we don't have a very coherent idea of what we're supposed to eat. So everybody's, as usual, on their own, right? Anyway, here's the great thing. In 1998, when I started researching food, you're not going to believe this, but maybe you lived it too. No one wanted to talk about it in the U.S. No one wanted to talk about food. It was too...
But in Torino, yes.
It was, okay, I know.
Because Carlo Petrini had started slow food.
Slow food. And Europe
in the
has...
80s.
Europe has a completely different food culture.
And there are no transgenic corn in Piemonte. They raised it to the ground when somebody tried to plant it.
I salute that. I salute that. I think it's fantastic. Because we're not really given much choices. But now in the US, food is, it's a major discourse. Everybody talks about food. And there's so many choices. There's an explosion of farmers markets and organic and food pundits and movies about food, documentaries,
So
etc.
is your art essentially food?
No. It was just a big phase I went through.
You were making food projects.
I was giving a lot of lectures, actually, about food.
Giving lectures around food, but what does it mean in terms of the art that you make?
Okay, but that led me to alternative methods of agriculture, and that led me to soil, and that was also about compost.
And form. Okay, in the documenta, I can't remember how I met you. How did I meet you? I mean...
Your assistant contacted me and said you wanted to meet with me in Chicago.
But why? We don't know. I can't remember. Anyway,
a lot of people had talked to you about me.
Okay.
Michael Rakowitz, Renee and Irene, and then you went to Svalbard.
Ah, that's it. I think that's also one of the reasons, because I went to Svalbard with Amar Kambar and Mark Dian and a few other people. And when I was researching Svalbard Seed Bank in 2011, I came across your article about the Svalbard Seed Bank and the problems around the idea of a global seed bank. And there was this artist, Claire Pentecost. That's how it happened, I think. The first time I came across your work was the article you wrote about Svalbard, questioning the validity of global seed banks made for the purpose of saving diverse species of seeds, because your position, as many progressive people, is that the concentration of seeds is dangerous, and it's much better to have a distributed number of small seed banks where seeds are allowed to turn into other seeds and they are more alive.
Actually, the paper was comparing Svalbard as a model of knowledge and knowledge preservation with Vandana Shiva's research farm in India called Navdanya, which in Svalbard they just gather all the seeds, and it's run by states and corporations, and they put them in the deep freeze. In Navdanya, the seeds are in constant circulation. Farmers can borrow the seeds, and then they plant them, and then they give back seeds. And I was arguing that seeds are knowledge, and that knowledge is safer in circulation. The more distributed it is, the more robust it is.
That sounds like a digital age. I mean, the idea that, a kind of utopian idea that if we have many distributed nodes of knowledge that can be put together or connected, it's safer than...
Well, safety is, I just brought up that because that was the idea of Svalbard, but it's living, it's being used, it's growing, it's evolving.
But are you sure, Claire? Are you sure today that you think, do we think the same thing with the collapse of diversity, also due to the concentration of repetition of thoughts over a distributed area of knowledge, such as the internet? I mean, we don't have more ideas, we have less ideas. We don't have more complex ideas. We generally, the masses generally have less complex ideas, because that distribution of nodes turns into mirrors of repetition of pieces of knowledge, and then with the algorithms, the predictive algorithms, they feed back into those knowledges that are becoming more and more standardized as opposed to more and more diverse. Maybe, as today, maybe, I'm just asking you that, because if we look on a certain level of the knowledges in the world and people are repeating a lot of stereotypes all over.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think knowledge is being produced all the time. And it's...
Well, you're a utopian, because they're not getting necessarily into the way we run the world.
Okay, listen, things look bad.
Things look bad.
Things look really bad. But I feel I have a moral obligation to act as though we can make a difference. Because if we don't act like that, nothing is going to change for the better. So we have to have a kind of force of spirit, despite the fact, I mean, I think about like, maybe nothing's going to change, things are just going to get worse and worse and worse. Does that change how I'm going to behave? No. I'm still going to live according to my ethics and share those ethics and share generosity and encourage the independent, autonomous, collective kind of learning that I've had the privilege of being part of all of my adult life. Now, what if we asked the audience if they had any questions?
Ok.
Any questions?
Allora, passiamo la parola a voi. Se i tecnici possono accendere le luci di là, dall'altra parte. Ecco. Ok. Dunque, questo è un abrupt fine della conversazione, ma apertura a incorporare anche la vostra domanda, partecipazione, commento.
You can also have a comment.
Yeah,
It can be a question or a comment. I said that in Italian. I said it in English.
Qualcuno vuole prendere uno dei microfoni? Grazie. Do you mind if I just stay sitting because I have a bad hip?
Oh, please,
Okay.
please, please. I just need to stand up because otherwise my head gets, starts to compress. And I'm sitting in that seat, it's so low. Okay. Things get compacted. Allora.
I see some people that deal with archives of knowledge in the audience. What do they think? For example,
You're calling me out. One thought I had with Claire hating specialization.
I do not hate specialization at all.
And us being the most specialized form and approach.
Sorry.
Is it?
Lynn was reacting to something that Mariana had said in a conversation.
But feel free to react, to correct, or to nuance it.
I think specialization's great. It's accomplished amazing things. It's also very pleasurable for the individual specializing. But I think we live in a moment where our specialties need to come together. Our specialties are most valuable in their connection with other specialties because our problems are complex and we need multidisciplinary thinking. There's no way around it.
And also I think...
La domanda era chiedeva se era contraria alle specializzazioni di conseguenza. E ha detto no, sono a favore delle specializzazioni, ma si devono incontrare in una pluridisciplinarietà.
But I also think, it is sitting here now after our workshop that couldn't be more specialized in the every detail. It is, our specialization doesn't lead anywhere if we don't have a vision. And for a vision, it's not enough to be specialized. It is that you need the constant friction with either other specialists, or I'm saying that our specialist haters.
Other specialists hate you?
No, or no, having either completely other specialists who challenge you, or having people who question specialization.
I don't.
But
I'm not on the side of people who question people with expertise. I mean, we're in trouble because of that, and I think that your specialization does lead places. I've talked to you about it the last couple of nights, and I think you do have a vision. No?
Yeah. Yes.
L'artista sta parlando con una esperta di studi di provenienza delle opere d'arte, perché abbiamo un altro workshop in corso al Castello di Rivoli in questi giorni per la formazione di specialisti nella ricerca di provenienza delle opere. Quindi stavano dibattendo sulla presenza o assenza di visione nel lavoro di uno studioso di provenienza. E diceva Claire che ha senz'altro una visione, but the vision would have to be also connected with principles, ethical principles or philosophical principles around restitution or non-restitution, or authenticity or non-authenticity, or what makes. I think that means the time is up. Goodness. Let's have a few more questions.
Maybe two more.
Ancora due commenti o domande?
Volevo chiederti una cosa. Parlando del compost sono emerse soprattutto delle questioni legate alle nozioni di reciprocità, di generosità, di scambio, cioè dei valori positivi. E pensavo anche al tema invece del conflitto. Che posizione ha il conflitto? Nel compost ci sono animali che mangiano altri, batteri che ostruggono altri.
She says you don't speak much about conflict or the resourceability in conflict, for example, an animal eating another animal,
Just ask.
Actually, I will say that in the workshop we talked about the trophic cascade, which is la cascada trófica. Do I have that right? Yeah. And that is all about who eats whom.
La questione di chi mangia chi è fondamentale nel compostaggio.
Because that's part of how nutrients are recycled. And it's a principle of life.
È il principio della vita consumare.
We have to eat. Every living creature either eats or photosynthesizes.
Tutte le creature viventi o fotosintetizzano elementi o mangiano elementi.
And the photosynthesizers are fed by the microorganisms.
E i fotosintetizzatori sono nutriti dai microorganismi
who consumed the decaying organic matter.
Che consumavano la materia organica che decade. Non usa la parola conflitto. Io sto parlando in un microfono.
You want some conflict?
Cioè non usa, mi sembra che non usi la parola conflitto, ma questo è legato anche al pensiero di Lynn Margulis, che io credo essere filosoficamente alla base di tutta l'opera di Claire Pentecost, perché è una profonda divergenza rispetto al pensiero darwiniano ed è basato sulla collaborazione, perché tanti esempi che prima in un darwinismo classico erano delle eccezioni sono sviluppi dovuti a decisioni di collaborazione, di messa in comune di certe caratteristiche di una specie con un'altra, ad esempio certe ants, formiche con certi alberi o piante, che permettono una una evoluzione. E in una visione marburisiana non esiste il conflitto, esiste solo la collaborazione, che però può essere visto come conflitto se noi antropocentricamente attribuiamo a questo un connotato conflittuale. Questo ha a che vedere anche con la storia del pensiero femminista, a cui lei deve molto anche in generale, che è una storia di pensiero molto diversa dalla competitività del pensiero tradizionale patriarcale. So, you come also from feminist studies, thinking in terms of collaboration as opposed to competition.
Yeah, but I don't want to impose an ideology on biology. That's happened too much. I mean, the thing about the competition, the narrative of evolution progressing, if you want to call it progress, or moving through competition is very compatible with capitalism, okay? And Margulis, her idea was symbiogenesis, that through symbiotic relations we get morphogenesis, new forms. For instance, we have prokaryotic cells with no nucleus.
You said it already.
Oh, did we say that?
Yeah, you said it.
I've said it so many times. I'm on a mission. So, anyway, one ate the other, blah, blah, blah. You know the story. But I really don't want to impose an ideology on this thing, this phenomena, this reality that we call nature. And it is work. It is work to try to understand nature, to sense it, to comprehend it, to apprehend it, without all these structures we have made, these structures of imagination of what nature is. Like Timothy Morton says, ecology without nature. What's he talking about? He's saying that we want to try, I mean, maybe we'll never get there, but we want to try to practice an ecology that somehow works through, over, and around our preconceptions of what this thing called nature is.
Uscire dai preconcetti di quello che pensiamo essere questa cosa che noi chiamiamo natura. Ci sono troppi preconcetti e non vorrebbe ideologizzare il discorso né in una direzione né nell'altra. Ed è un lavoro, dice, è un lavoro. Parla spesso di inconscio, io penso che ci sia anche il collegamento con queste idee di Durcharbeiten, to work through in the psychoanalytic sense too.
Sure. You know, it's the end. I'll leave you with a thought. Merleau-Ponty, the philosopher of phenomenology, talks about seeing your face from the inside. And it's called heutoscopy. And it's a very strange idea. How can I see my face from the inside? And it's about, to me, achieving a kind of distance so you can, as the phenomenologist did, bracket your experience and try to divorce it from your preconceptions.
It's very interesting. È molto interessante perché è un principio fondamentalmente espressionista. Parla di, anziché ideologizzare, vedere da fuori, poter vedere la forma dall'interno, cioè vedere dall'interno il proprio viso, cioè fare questo esercizio di vedere il proprio viso dall'interno. Questo è un esercizio tipico dell'espressionismo, per esempio, classico. Una delle fonti principali finali, cioè Goya, e quindi tu soutieni e il cerchio si chiude. Brava! Brava! Thank you very much.